They staked her out at the edge of the territory, chained to the cold earth as bait for the rogues, her own pack. She could hear the snarls in the tree line getting closer, but then a different presence shattered the night, an alpha king whose power silenced the forest, and he was looking only at her. This was not an accident. It was a calculated sacrifice by the Silver Fang pack, offering up their weakest member to solve a rogue problem. But as the king of the northern wilds kneels before the chained woman, one terrifying question remains. Did he come to claim the bait, or to claim his revenge? Her name was Elara. In the Silver Fang pack, strength was everything. It was measured in the depth of your snarl, the territory you could claim, and the prestige of your lineage. Elara possessed none of that. Her parents had been mid-ranked hunters, lost to a winter storm when she was 8. What she did have was a gentle wolf, an empathetic touch that could soothe the most frenzied shift, and an eidetic memory for pack lore and tradition. She was their historian, their medic, their anchor, and in the eyes of Alpha Gideon, that made her the perfect, expendable solution. For months, a rogue faction had been bleeding Silver Fang territory dry. Led by a vicious alpha named Kale, they didn't just attack, they tortured. They left survivors mutilated as messages. Gideon's warriors were being picked off in the dense, old-growth forests along the northern border. The pack was hemorrhaging money, morale, and lives. The neighboring Timbercrest pack offered an alliance, but only if Gideon's beta, Marcus, bonded with their alpha's daughter. Marcus, however, had shared a lifetime of quiet glances and unspoken promises with Elara. He refused. The alliance collapsed. Gideon's authority was cracking. The final straw was the massacre at Moonfall Creek. 6 enforcers, ambushed. The rogues left their bodies arranged in a crude crescent moon, a symbol of the Silver Fang's founding. It was a declaration of war, and a mockery of their history. A history only Elara knew in its entirety. In a private council, Gideon's second, a ruthless strategist named Victoria, laid out the brutal calculus. Kale was too cunning to chase a full patrol. But he was arrogant. He loved a spectacle. He would come for a single, helpless prize left out in the open. A piece of the pack's soul offered on a platter. They called it the blood tithe, an ancient, almost forgotten rite where a pack could offer one of its own to the wilderness to appease a greater threat. It was a last resort, buried in the oldest ledgers Elara herself had preserved. Victoria found it. Gideon authorized it. They just needed the right offering, not a warrior. That would be a fair fight Kale would avoid. They needed someone whose loss would be a spiritual wound, a person whose terror scent would be pure and irresistible. They needed someone no other pack would avenge. They needed Elara. The night they took her, they told her it was a perimeter ritual to bless the borders. They gave her a ceremonial robe. Marcus was away on a scouting mission, deliberately sent far to the south. When she reached the sacred stones at the territory's edge, 4 enforcers surrounded her. Victoria spoke the old words. Gideon looked on, his face a mask of stone. They used cold-forged iron chains, the only metal that could dampen a wolf's strength, and anchored them to the heart of the largest standing stone. They left her there as the sun vanished, with nothing but her thin robe against the biting frost. The last thing she heard was Victoria's cold whisper. "Your sacrifice will be remembered, little historian." Then, the howls began. Not from the rogues. From her own pack, a chorus celebrating their brave tithe, fading as they retreated to the safety of the den. Alone in the suffocating dark, Elara's mind raced. She remembered every story of the rogues' cruelty. She felt the ancient, fearful energy of the stone at her back. Then a new scent cut through the pine, and her own fear, musk, frost, and absolute power. It was a scent from the legends she'd memorized. The Alpha King, Ronin of the northern wilds, a sovereign who ruled the vast untamed ranges beyond all pack borders, a myth. He stood at the tree line, his silhouette larger than any wolf she'd ever seen. He didn't look at the woods where rogue snarls now echoed. He looked only at her, his eyes glowing like molten gold in the dark. He took one step forward. The rogues went silent. The Alpha King didn't attack the rogues, he ignored them. With a sound like shearing metal, he severed the iron chains with a single swipe of his claws, freeing Elara, as if she were wrapped in paper, not forged steel. As she collapsed, her legs numb, he caught her, wrapping her in a cloak of heavy furs that carried his scent, deep pine and winter midnight. The rogues, 6 of them, emerged from the trees. Their leader, Kale, was a monster of scar tissue and malice. He grinned, showing yellowed fangs. "King Ronan, we didn't expect to see you this far south, but we appreciate the delivery. The tithe is ours." Ronan didn't set Elara down. He held her against his chest, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "You misunderstand. I'm not here for your war. I'm collecting a debt." Then he did something impossible. He released a fraction of his aura, Not a wave, but a sharp targeted blade of pure dominance. It didn't hit the rogues, it hit Kale alone. The rogue Alpha's eyes bulged. He dropped to all fours, a whimper escaping his throat, as his own beta stared in shock. "This woman," Ronan said, his words precise and final, "is under my protection. Your quarrel with Silver Fang is yours. Touch what is mine, and I will erase your lineage from these woods. Do you comprehend?" Kale, fighting for breath, managed a jerky nod. Ronan turned, carrying Ilara into the forest, leaving the rogues in stunned, terrified silence. He had just ended a border war without throwing a single punch. Ilara was in shock, her mind unable to process the warmth of his body, or the sudden, absolute safety she felt. He carried her for miles, deep into territory no pack map ever charted, to a secluded hunting lodge made of massive logs. Inside, a fire roared. He set her gently on a bearskin rug before the hearth. "The iron has poisoned your blood," he stated, his golden eyes assessing her. "You need warmth and food." He moved to the fireplace, his movements efficient. Ilara found her voice, though it was a scratchy whisper. "Why? Why would you do that? The blood tithe. It was sanctioned." Ronan paused, his broad back to her. "A tithe is an offering to the wild, to fate itself, not to a rabid dog like Kale. Your Alpha didn't make a sacrifice, he made a delivery, and he broke an ancient covenant in the process." He turned, his gaze intense. "Do you know what the blood tithe truly is, historian?" Ilara shook her head, the title he used striking her deeply. "It is the absolute last resort of a pack on the verge of extinction. The offering must be willing. It must be a warrior, ready to face their death to buy their family time. What Gideon did was not a tithe. It was a coward's execution. And he used my territory to do it." The word "my" landed with the weight of a mountain. Ilara's eyes widened. "Your territory?" Ronan nodded once. "The Standing Stones, the entire northern forest where you were chained. It is part of the northern wilds. It has been for 500 years. Silver Fang has been squatting on it, mining its resources for the past century because I allowed it. Your Alpha just committed an act of war on sovereign land. He littered. With you. The realization was a physical blow. Her pack hadn't just betrayed her, they had triggered a diplomatic catastrophe with the most powerful being on the continent. And Ronan had every right to slaughter them all for it. "You're not going to kill them," she breathed, not as a question, but as a desperate realization of his restraint. Ronan's expression softened, just a fraction. "No, because when I crossed that border tonight, I wasn't tracking rogues or policing treaties. I was following a scent I haven't smelled in over a century." He knelt before her, his eyes searching hers. "The scent of my fated mate." The world stopped, the fire crackled, the bond, a thread she hadn't even noticed in her terror, suddenly pulled taut in her chest. It wasn't the faint, hopeful pull she'd sometimes imagined. This was a geographic, unbreakable tether to the man kneeling before her, the king of the wilds, her mate. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm an Omega in all but name." Ronan reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek. "You are the memory of my people. You're the gentle hand that balances the claw. You're the one my wolf has waited for. Your pack's blindness is my profound fortune." He stood abruptly, as if fighting the urge to claim her right then. "We leave at dawn for my stronghold Obsidian Keep. You will be safe there." But Ilara, the practical, forgotten heart of Silver Fang, thought of Marcus. She thought of the few friends she had left. She thought of the pack, flawed and cruel, but still her home. "And my pack?" Ronan's gaze turned to ice. "Gideon will answer to me, but first he will see what he threw away." At first light, Ronan didn't sneak Ilara back. He marched her through the front gates of the Silver Fang compound in broad daylight. He didn't disguise her in his furs. He let her walk beside him, her borrowed cloak open to show the torn ceremonial robe beneath, the cruel evidence of the chains still visible on her wrists. The sentries froze, then scrambled, bells ringing in alarm. By the time they reached the central square, the entire pack had assembled, their faces a mix of terror, confusion, and sheer disbelief. Alpha Gideon stood on the porch of the pack house, Victoria at his side, her calculating eyes wide. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face etched with agony and dawning hope. "Ilara," Ronan's voice cut through the chaos, not a shout, but a command that demanded silence. "Alpha Gideon, you left an offering on my land. I have retrieved it." Gideon paled but puffed out his chest. "King Ronan, the tithe was a pack matter, a sacred right." "You lie to my face," Ronan said, almost conversationally. "The right requires consent." Did she consent? The square went dead quiet. Every eye turned to Ilara. Gideon spluttered. It was for the good of the pack. Her duty, Ronan took one step forward. The entire pack, including Gideon, took an involuntary step back. Her duty, Ronan interrupted, is now to me. The blood tithe is void. Furthermore, your treaty to occupy the northern forest is revoked. You have 30 days to remove your logging equipment and your people. After that, they will be removed for you. The pack erupted in panic. That forest was their primary income. Gideon looked like he'd been gutted, but Victoria's eyes were locked on Ilara, a new, venomous understanding dawning. She saw the way Ronan stood slightly in front of her, the protective angle of his body. She smelled the new mingling scents. You took her for yourself, Victoria accused, her voice sharp. You used this to steal our land and our resource. Ronan finally smiled. It was a terrifying sight. No, I claimed what has always been mine, on both counts. He turned to Ilara, his voice dropping to a tone meant only for her, yet carrying to every wolf present. Come, my queen. We're going home. The title hit the pack like a shockwave. Queen. He wasn't just taking a mate, he was elevating their discarded historian to a throne. As Ronan led Ilara away, Marcus took a stumbling step forward, his heart breaking in his eyes. Ilara looked back once, her gaze meeting his. There was sorrow, but no apology. Her old life was gone. The journey to Obsidian Keep was a blur of snowy peaks and towering pines. Ronan's territory was not just land, it was a living, breathing kingdom of wilderness. The keep itself was carved into the side of a mountain, a fortress of stone and dark timber that looked both ancient and impenetrable. His pack, the wild-born, were different. They were quieter, their power a steady hum rather than a sharp threat. They looked at Ilara not with pity or scorn, but with a deep, reverent curiosity. The den mother, an elderly she-wolf named Anya, greeted her with a tearful smile. The stories were true, she murmured, touching Ilara's cheek. The king's heart has finally found its keeper. For the first week, Ilara moved through her new life in a daze. Ronan was relentless in his care. He gave her rooms filled with books, a studio overlooking the valleys, and a seat beside him at every meal. He explained his world, a network of alliances and businesses that stretched across the human and wolf worlds, all managed from this remote citadel. The mate bond grew stronger each day, a warm golden light in her chest that healed the cold wound of her betrayal. But she wasn't just a consort. Ronan began bringing her ledgers, treaties, asking her opinion on border disputes based on historical precedent. He was, she realized, utilizing the very skills her old pack had exploited and ignored. Meanwhile, in the crumbling Silverfang territory, panic had curdled into desperation. With the northern forest gone, bankruptcy loomed within months. Gideon was paralyzed, drinking himself into stupors. It was Victoria who seized control. She saw not a tragedy, but an opportunity. Ilara, the weak little historian, was now the key to the kingdom. If they could get her back, or even just leverage her influence, they could restore everything. She found Marcus, brooding and bitter. He stole her, Marcus growled. He stole everything. He did, Victoria purred, her mind weaving a new cruel plot. And he's a king. Kings have enemies. And they are subject to laws even they cannot ignore. She laid out her plan. They wouldn't attack Ronan physically. They would attack him where it would hurt most, his claim on Ilara. They would use the very traditions Ilara cherished against her. Victoria invoked the right of contested claim. An archaic law stating that if a mate bond is formed under duress or coercion, like being rescued from certain death, any prior, legitimate claimant can challenge for the mate's bond in a trial of 3 tests. The loophole was sickeningly clever. Marcus had been Ilara's acknowledged, if unofficial, suitor for years, by pack custom that gave him a claim. And because Ronan had claimed Ilara immediately after her traumatic abandonment, Victoria argued it was coercive. She took her case not to Ronan, but to the Continental Council of Alphas, the governing body that even kings were bound to respect. The summons arrived at Obsidian Keep on a scroll sealed with wax. Ronan read it, his expression turning to glacial fury. He crumpled the parchment in his fist. They dare. Ilara read the formal language. It demanded their presence at a neutral territory, the Stone Summit, in 7 days' time to answer the formal challenge or forfeit the bond's legitimacy. The council was forcing him to play by rules he could easily crush, but doing so would make him a tyrant in the eyes of all werewolf society. This is my fault, Ilara said, her voice hollow. If I had been stronger, if I had refused Marcus clearly, Ronan cupped her face. No. This is the venom of a cornered snake. They are trying to trap us in a cage of their own making. We will go, and we will break the cage. The Stone Summit was a stark, windswept plateau high in the Rockies. Representatives from a dozen major packs formed a silent judging circle. Alpha Gideon looked shrunken, but Victoria stood proud and defiant. Marcus was there, his gaze conflicted, unable to look at Alara. The presiding elder, an ancient alpha named Thorn, spoke. King Ronan, the challenge has been lodged under the old laws. Do you accept the right of contested claim, or do you concede the bond was improperly formed? Ronan's voice echoed across the stone. I accept the right, and I will win it. Thorn nodded. Then the trials are set. The first, a test of history and truth, judged by the council archivists. The second, a test of worth, judged by the challenger. The third, a test of the bond itself, judged by the moon's magic. The victor's claim will be sealed by law and soul. The first trial seemed designed for Alara to lose. She and Marcus were brought to a stone table piled with ancient artifacts and fragments of text. The head archivist, a wizened wolf, pointed to a shattered clay tablet. Identify the clan symbol, the treaty it represents, and the year it was broken. It was a fragment from the Shadow Wars, a conflict so old most packs had only myths about it. Marcus paled. Alara stepped forward, her historian's mind clicking into place. She touched the etched lines. This is the sigil of the Ash-Chained clan. The treaty was the pact of the Silent Forest, brokered with the Northern Wilds to end their territorial raids. It was broken in the year 1327, when the Ash-Chained betrayed the pact by poaching sacred stags. She looked up. The king who enforced the penalty was Ronan's great-grandfather, Theron. The penalty was the dissolution of their clan. The archivist's eyes widened. He consulted a massive tome, then nodded. Correct in every detail. Marcus had no answer. The first trial was won. But Victoria's smile didn't fade. She had expected to lose this one. It was a setup. The second trial was the test of worth. Marcus, as challenger, could set the terms. He stood before Alara, pain in his eyes. I challenge you to the run of the faithful heart, he said, his voice strained. You must run the old hunting path from here to the Moonfall Creek and back, alone before moon high. If you succeed, you prove your worth is in your own spirit, not just in his protection. It was a brutal run, over 20 miles of treacherous terrain, the same creek where the rogue massacre had happened. But it was also a test that played to Alara's quiet endurance, not brute strength. Ronan snarled. That path is in rogue claim territory now. This is a death sentence. Marcus flinched but held his ground. The law states the challenger sets the test. She can forfeit. Alara looked at Marcus, seeing not malice, but a man manipulated into believing this was his only chance to save her from a forced bond. She placed a hand on Ronan's arm. I'll run. Alone on the path, with only the moon and the whispering pines for company, Alara felt a terror deeper than the night of the chains. This was active pursuit, not passive waiting. She ran, her lungs burning. Halfway to the creek, she heard the first growl. Not a rogue. A sleek, familiar wolf, one of Victoria's personal enforcers, who had slipped away from the summit. The trial was a sham. It was an assassination. The wolf charged. Alara, fueled by adrenaline and the newfound strength of her bond, dodged. She couldn't fight, but she knew these woods from her studies. She led the enforcer on a chase toward a section of unstable ground, a bog marked in old maps. The wolf, heavier, sank. Alara didn't look back. She reached the creek, touched the water, and turned to run back. That's when the true trap sprang. A net of silver-laced rope, hidden in the canopy, dropped on her. The silver burned, sapping her strength. 3 figures emerged, not rogues. Silver Fang enforcers, loyal to Victoria. The king can't save you out here, little queen. One sneered. This was the real plan. Disappear her during the trial, blame the rogues, and let Marcus win by default. But they had forgotten who she was mated to. The bond wasn't just love, it was a radar. Ronan, back at the summit, felt a wave of panic and burning pain through the bond. He didn't roar. He vanished from the circle, moving faster than any wolf present had ever seen. He followed the tether in his soul like a homing beacon. He found the enforcers preparing to drag a bound Alara away. The king of the wilds did not give them a chance to speak. It was not a fight, it was an extermination. When he carried Alara back into the circle at the stone summit, he was spattered with blood that wasn't his. He laid her gently down, the silver net cut away. He then turned to the council, his eyes pure, raging gold. The second trial was a murder plot. My mate completed the run. Then she was ambushed by members of the challenging pack. I have executed the attackers. The trial is void. I claim victory by default of foul play. The evidence was on his clothes and in Alara's wounds. The council murmured, appalled. Elder Thorn looked at a terrified Victoria. Is this true? Before she could lie, Marcus broke. He fell to his knees. It's true. She promised me I could win her back fairly, but she said we had to ensure she didn't finish. I didn't know about the silver. I didn't know they would kill her. The betrayal was complete. Victoria was seized by council guards. Gideon was stripped of his alpha rank on the spot for conspiring in the act. But the law was clear. The rite, once begun, had to be completed. A third trial remained. Elder Thorn looked grave. The final test, the test of the bond, cannot be faked. The challenger has been disqualified by his own confession, but the law requires the test be administered to affirm the bond's purity before all. You must both undergo the moon's embrace. Ronan helped Elara to her feet. "What is it?" she asked. Thorn explained. "You will be placed in the sacred circle, under the full moon's light, with a silver blade, the bond severer. You must each willingly hold the blade and affirm your bond. If the bond is true and freely given, the silver will not burn you. If there is coercion or falsehood, it will burn the one who lies, or both." It was the ultimate gamble. Silver was poison to their kind. To hold it was agony. To hold it willingly was a testament of absolute truth. Ronan didn't hesitate. "We will do it." In the center of the plateau, a circle of white stones glowed in the moonlight. The ceremonial blade, ancient and ornate, was placed on a pedestal. The entire council watched. Ronan took Elara's hand. Together, they stepped into the circle. The moon's light felt like a physical pressure. Ronan went first. He wrapped his hand around the hilt of the silver blade. A hiss of pain, but his skin did not blister or smoke. He looked at Elara, his voice unwavering. "I claim Elara not by right of conquest, but by the will of fate. My bond is true, my heart is hers, and my protection is eternal." He placed the blade back. It was Elara's turn. Her hands, still raw from the net, trembled. She closed her eyes, thinking of the chains, the loneliness, and then the warmth that had found her in the dark. She grasped the hilt. A searing, incredible pain shot up her arm. But as she focused on the golden tether in her chest, the pain transformed into a fierce, clean heat. She looked at Ronan, her voice clear and strong. "I choose Ronan not as a savior, but as my mate. My bond is true, my heart is his, and my choice is free." She held the blade aloft. Her skin, against all odds, remained unmarked. A collective gasp went up. The moon's light seemed to intensify around them, approving. The bond was verified. It was absolute. Elder Thorn pronounced the verdict. The right of contested claim is concluded. The bond between King Ronan and Elara is affirmed as true, sacred, and inviolate. Any further challenge will be met with the full wrath of this council. It was over. They had won. But as Ronan led his queen away from the stone summit, the cost was clear. Silver Fang was destroyed, its leaders disgraced. Marcus was broken, and Elara had been forced to prove her love under threat of torture and death. The victory was real, but it tasted of ash and silver, and in the shadows, as the council disbanded, one of the exiled Silver Fang enforcers, loyal to Victoria even in chains, watched them go. He pulled a satellite phone from his jacket and dialed a number far to the north. "The legal play failed," he whispered. "The king is returning to his keep with his queen, but we have their route. And the rogue, Kale, still wants his pound of flesh. He'll be waiting." The war wasn't over. It was just changing battlefields. The ambush on the mountain pass wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of war from two enemies who had nothing left to lose. Kale's rogues wanted vengeance for their humiliation. The Silver Fang traitors wanted Elara erased. And they struck at the one moment Ronan's guard was down when he thought he'd already won. The convoy of 3 SUVs was halfway through the winding pass when the first explosion rocked the lead vehicle, a controlled avalanche of rock and snow blocking the road ahead. Before the dust settled, figures swarmed from the cliffs, rogues, and leading them, the scarred face of Kale, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him was the exiled Silver Fang enforcer, the traitor who had made the call. Ronan was out of his vehicle before it fully stopped, shifting mid-leap into a massive, black-furred wolf of legendary size. His roar shook ice from the canyon walls. His personal guard, including his beta, shifted and formed a protective ring. Elara, still in human form, was shoved into the armored center of the circle. Kale grinned, his own pack flanking him. "No council here, King. No laws. Just the sharp end of things. You took my prize, now I take yours." The traitor enforcer snarled. "The pack may be gone, but her death is our final tithe." They attacked as one. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter, but not the one the rogues planned. Ronan did not fight to defend. He fought to exterminate. He moved through Kale's forces like a force of nature, a blur of black fur and golden eyes that left broken bodies in his wake. He was making good on his promise to erase a lineage. His guard, elite and ruthless, cut down the rest. Elara, from her place in the circle, saw the traitor enforcer break through, coming straight for her. Fear spiked, but with it came a surge of power from the bond and a cold, clear memory. She wasn't just a historian, she was a student of pack law, which included the laws of combat. As the enforcer lunged, she didn't try to outmuscle him. She dropped low, using his momentum, and swept his legs in a move she'd seen in a century-old manual on Omega Defense. He crashed down, stunned. Ronan's beta was there in an instant, his jaws closing on the traitor's throat with a final snap. Kale, seeing his forces decimated, made a desperate bid. He bypassed Ronan entirely and charged the circle, aiming for the one crack in the armor, Ilara. Ronan turned, but he was yards away. Kale's claws were inches from Ilara's face when her own wolf, the gentle spirit she'd always subdued, finally surged to the surface. It did not surge with rage, but with an ancient, commanding authority. A low, resonant hum emitted from her, a sound that made every wolf, friend and foe, pause. Kale faltered, confused. In that split second of hesitation, Ronan was upon him. The king's jaws closed around Kale's neck, and with a single vicious twist, it was over. The rogue alpha was dead. The remaining rogues fled into the mountains, masterless and broken. The silence that fell was absolute, heavy with the scent of blood and ended threats. Back at Obsidian Keep, the final accounting began. The bodies of the traitor enforcer and Kale were delivered to the Continental Council as evidence of the continued conspiracy. The Council's judgment was swift and severe. The remains of the Silver Fang Pack were officially dissolved. Their territory was absorbed into the Northern Wilds. Any members who had participated in the plot against the Queen were banished to the frozen wastes. Those who were innocent were offered integration, but under strict probation. Alpha Gideon and Victoria were handed over to human authorities for the attempted murder plot, their fate sealed in a human prison where their wolves would slowly wither. Marcus, broken by his role, chose self-exile, leaving the continent entirely. For Ilara and Ronan, the hard-fought peace was not just an absence of war, it was the foundation of their rule. Ilara took to her role as queen not as a figurehead, but as a reformer. She used her knowledge of history and law to streamline the Council's archaic codes. She established the first Interpack Archive, a library of shared history to prevent the loss of knowledge that had almost doomed her. She turned the reclaimed Silverfang lands into a protected sanctuary, a place of healing for wounded wolves from any pack. Ronan watched her with a pride that was almost awe. She was the balance he never knew he needed. Her gentle strength tempered his absolute power, making him not just a feared king, but a wise ruler. A year after the Night of the Chains, on the anniversary of their bonding, Ronan led Ilara to the keep's highest balcony overlooking the kingdom. The northern lights danced in the sky. He placed a small ancient wooden box in her hands. "This belonged to my mother. She said to give it to my queen when I found the one who carried the old song in her heart." Ilara opened it. Inside was not jewelry, but a brittle, preserved scroll. She unrolled it carefully. It was a genealogy, a lineage written in a forgotten dialect she could somehow still read. Her eyes traced the names, moving back through centuries until they landed on a name that made her gasp. It was the name of the last recorded lorekeeper of the Northern Wilds, a position vacant for 150 years. The title had been passed through a maternal line thought to be extinct. The last bearer had disappeared into the southern packs, her fate unknown. The name of that lorekeeper was the same as Ilara's maternal grandmother. The final, stunning truth settled over her. She hadn't just been a random historian. She was the last descendant of the Wildborn's own lorekeepers. Her perfect memory, her intuitive understanding of their laws, her very soul, it was her birthright. The bond with Ronan was not a chance rescue. It was a homecoming written in blood and stars long before she was born. Her pack hadn't just sacrificed an Omega, they had thrown away a royal heir. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at Ronan. He smiled, brushing a tear away with his thumb. "The wild always calls its own home, my love. No chains can ever hold you again." Below them, the kingdom slept, secure and thriving. The rogue threat was erased. The traitors were gone. The historian chained as bait had become the queen who held the very history of her people in her hands, and the Alpha King who found her in the dark now ruled, forever by her side. So, what is the ultimate lesson from Ilara's journey from sacrifice to sovereignty? It's that true power is often mistaken for weakness. The Silver Fang Pack saw a gentle historian, a woman without sharp claws, and deemed her expendable. They failed to recognize that her knowledge was a sharper weapon, her empathy a stronger bond, and her spirit the very anchor a king needed to build a lasting legacy. In their ruthless pragmatism, they didn't just lose a pawn, they lost a queen, and with her, their entire future. It's a stark reminder that destiny cannot be chained, and those who are underestimated often hold the keys to the kingdom. The universe has a way of correcting balance, of delivering hard karma to those who betray their own, and of leading the lost directly home. If this tale of fated mates, brutal betrayal, and stunning cosmic justice captivated you, do the pack a favor. Hit that like button to howl your approval. Share this story with anyone who loves a twist where the underdog doesn't just win, but reigns supreme. And subscribe to the channel, ringing that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the wild, untamed stories that remind us why we root for the quiet strength in a loud world. Let me know in the comments, what was the most satisfying moment of the Silver Fang's downfall?